The diner sat on the edge of a quiet highway just outside the city. At 6 in the morning, the sky was still pale gray, and the world felt slow and half awake. Inside, soft country music played from an old speaker near the kitchen door. The smell of coffee and warm bread filled the air. Emily Carter tied her apron the same way she did every morning, carefully with steady hands. She liked routines. Routines felt safe. She had been working at Maplewood Diner for almost 8 years. She knew which regular would ask for extra cream. She knew which truck drivers preferred the corner booth. She knew how to keep her voice calm even when the line was long and the coffee machine was acting stubborn. Most people who came in saw only a waitress. They didn't know that Emily had once studied engineering before life shifted under her feet. When her mother became ill, Emily left college to help at home. The semesters passed, the bills grew, and eventually the dream quietly folded itself into the back of a drawer. Now, at 32, she poured coffee instead of solving equations. But her mind never stopped thinking. That morning started like any other. The bell above the door chimed softly as customers drifted in. Outside, fog hugged the road. At 8:15 a.m., a black car pulled into the gravel lot. It was sleek, expensive, out of place. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a dark suit that looked sharp against the simple diner sign. His face was tense, his phone was pressed tightly to his ear. "Fix it," he said, voice low but urgent. "We're losing millions by the hour." Emily noticed him right away, not because of the suit, but because of his eyes. They carried something heavy. He slid into a booth near the window, still talking into the phone. "Yes, I know it's $100 million exposure. That's why I'm calling." $100 million. The number felt unreal inside a place where the daily special cost $8.99. Emily approached with a small smile. "Good morning, sir. Coffee?" "Black." She poured carefully and stepped away, but his words stayed in her ears. Supply chain modeling failed. Projections were wrong. Nobody saw it. Emily moved back to the counter, but her mind had already begun connecting pieces. She wasn't trying to listen, but numbers had a way of catching her. The man ended the call and rubbed his forehead. He looked exhausted. After a few minutes, he opened a laptop. Charts and graphs glowed across the screen, rows of data, red numbers, sharp downward lines. Emily brought his breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast. As she set down the plate, her eyes briefly glanced at the screen. It was instinct. A formula in the corner caught her attention. He noticed her pause. "What?" he asked, not unkindly. "Just tired." "Nothing," she said quickly. "Sorry." He looked at her again, studying her for a moment. "Do you understand financial modeling?" She hesitated. "A little." He gave a short laugh. "Unless you're hiding an MBA under that apron, I doubt it." She didn't feel insulted. "Just calm. I studied systems engineering," she said softly. "A long time ago." He blinked. There was silence between them, the quiet kind, not awkward, just curious. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily." "I'm Daniel Reed." The name meant nothing to her. She didn't follow corporate news. She didn't know that Daniel Reed was the CEO of one of the largest logistics companies in the country. All she saw was a man who hadn't slept. He turned the laptop slightly. "We made a projection error in our shipping algorithm. It looked small at first, but scaled nationwide," he exhaled slowly. "It's about $100 million. Emily leaned slightly closer, careful not to invade his space. The numbers were clear. The issue wasn't the formula itself. It was an assumption buried inside it. "Your variable there," she said gently, pointing. "It assumes constant fuel fluctuation across regions." He stared at her. "Yes. But fuel variance isn't linear," she continued. "It's clustered, especially with seasonal routes." He didn't interrupt. She continued slowly, choosing simple words. "If you isolate the volatility by corridor instead of averaging it nationally, the risk spread changes." He turned fully toward her now. "Show me." Emily hesitated. Her heart beat a little faster. Not from fear, from something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. He slid the laptop toward her. She wiped her hands on her apron and sat carefully at the edge of the booth. She didn't rush. She didn't try to impress. She simply adjusted the model, one variable, then another. She separated the data by region, added a conditional weighting system. It took less than a minute. Daniel watched in complete silence. The red numbers shifted. The projected loss dropped dramatically. Then again and again. Finally, the screen stabilized. Not 100 million. Less than 5. Daniel leaned back slowly. That's not possible, he whispered. Emily leaned away, suddenly unsure. I could be wrong. He refreshed the data, ran the projection again. The results held. The error hadn't been catastrophic, it had been structural. And she had seen it in seconds. Daniel closed the laptop. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The diner carried on around them. Plates clinked, coffee poured. A truck driver laughed at something on the radio. The world had not changed. But something had. Emily, Daniel said quietly, do you realize what you just did? She shook her head slightly. You just saved my company. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. I just adjusted a model. He smiled faintly. Exactly. He stood up and looked around the diner, as if seeing it differently now. How long have you been working here? 8 years. And before that? College, she said. Didn't finish. He studied her face. There was no bitterness there, just acceptance. Why not? My mom got sick, she said simply. Life happens. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, he said. It does. He placed his credit card on the table, but before Emily could take it, he said, I'd like to offer you something. She blinked. A job. The word hung in the air. Not charity, he added quickly. Not gratitude. A position in systems analytics, full salary, full benefits. Will pay for you to finish your degree. The diner suddenly felt very small. Emily looked around, the counter she polished every morning, the coffee pot she carried like second nature. She had built a life here, but she had never stopped dreaming. I don't have a resume, she said quietly. I don't need one. Silence again. Her manager called from behind the counter. Emily, order up. She stood slowly. May I think about it? She asked. Daniel smiled. Of course. He wrote something on a napkin and handed it to her. His personal number, then he left. The bell chimed again as the door closed. The fog outside had lifted. All day, Emily moved through her shifts like usual. She refilled cups, she wiped tables, but inside something had shifted. That evening, she sat alone in her small apartment. She opened her old college notebook. Equations filled the pages, handwritten dreams. She ran her fingers across the paper. She wasn't angry at the years she had lost. She was grateful for the strength they had built. The next morning, she called Daniel. I'll accept, she said softly. 3 months later, Emily Carter walked into a glass office building downtown. Employees whispered as she passed. They had all heard the story. The waitress who fixed a $100 million problem. Daniel introduced her at the company meeting. He didn't focus on the money. He focused on something else. Talent, he said, standing beside her, does not always sit in corner offices. Sometimes it stands behind a diner counter. The room was quiet, not stunned, respectful. Emily didn't feel like a hero. She felt steady. Useful home that evening looked different, too. Not because it had changed, but because she had. She still moved slowly, still liked her routines. But now her mind had space again, and Daniel Reed, he kept a framed photo in his office. Not of a skyline, not of a boardroom, but of Maplewood Diner at sunrise. It reminded him of something simple. Brilliance does not always announce itself. Sometimes it pours your coffee first.